Everyone's on the hunt to fix their metabolism, when in reality, what's going on is not a slowing of the metabolism. Our metabolism is every system and process that goes into taking nutrients from the food that we eat and manufacturing them into fuel. It's energetics, it's everything, right? And that doesn't necessarily slow down at its core. Okay, that's not happening. That is not directly slowing down as we age. But if you start looking at data, you realize a couple of very simple things. Okay, for one, we've consumed a heck of a lot more in the way of refined starches, in the way of refined sugars, and those things have really just hockey sticked in the last 10, 15 years, right? So the lion's share of baby boomers and people that have grown up in a time when those kinds of things weren't around at first, they got exposed to them around, I don't know, their 20s, their 30s, and it just started to escalate. Well, I'm not here to pick on insulin, I'm not here to pick on carbohydrates, but one of the things that we do have to remember is that if our metabolism is functioning at its normal function, right? It's just doing its normal thing, and all of a sudden you have an excess of carbohydrates that are injected into your life, carbohydrates and insulin do stop lipolysis. Now, this isn't a bad thing in moderation, right? It's simple fuel preference, and the body is going to utilize carbs that come into the system. The simplest thing that I could ever say is carbs are designed to be burned. If you're gonna have carbs, you should probably plan on burning them and utilizing them and moving, right? So these carbs come in and they don't get utilized. Well, that triggers an insulin spike, and the insulin will stand in the way of fat being mobilized, okay? It has an anti-lipolytic effect. This does not mean throw all your carbohydrates away, but it does mean that if you are eating a lot, every little bit of carbohydrate that you add in is going to slow the process down in terms of shoveling fat into the bloodstream. That may make it seem like your metabolism is slowing down, but in a lot of ways, your metabolism is still doing its normal thing. It just has a reprioritization of the fuel that it is using. The other very important piece that goes hand in hand with this and kind of dovetails nicely is the fact that our activity rate has declined immensely. If you look at our activity as a population over the last 50 years, it's pretty insane. Okay, we had like the most activity during the Great Depression. People were walking around, people were moving, people didn't have access to transportation the same way, so they were walking. Then World War II, people were moving a lot, right? Then all of a sudden we have washing machines where people are able to just sit down and let their clothes get washed. We have everyone getting a car, so we've become more sedentary. And we do have to take a very honest look at these things, right? We say, wait a minute, maybe we are becoming more sedentary. And then we have the internet, we have TV, right? Boom, our activity level just crashes. And when you actually look at data, you realize that the bulk of people between 50 and 65 outside of their work life are insanely sedentary. Now, movement, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and exercise itself are huge, huge drivers of our metabolism. Remember, our metabolism is just utilizing fuel and turning it into energy. If you are not creating a demand for energy, you are not creating a need for fuel. So we take in that fuel and we store it. Couple that with hyperpalatable processed food that is rich in carbohydrates, you have declines in activity with increases in carbohydrates. You can see how that paints a picture that carbohydrates are the serious problem. And I'm not saying that they aren't, because they definitely are a huge problem in this case. But for people that are not willing to burn the carbohydrates, it is important that they keep their carbohydrates low. I really do sincerely believe that. If you're active and you're moving, then I think carbohydrates are fine, right? Very delicate balance there. The other piece that we do have to factor in a lot is protein consumption. Okay, protein is one of the most thermogenic foods that you can eat. And I'm not saying that it boosts your metabolism or does anything like that, but it does in a lot of ways cost a lot of metabolic energy to process protein. Now, FYI, I did put a link down below. Today's sponsor is Thrive Market. If you're interested in some protein snacks, things like that, I put a link down below. So you can save 30% off your entire grocery order. You can just navigate to like beef sticks or chomp sticks or any kind of beef jerky, anything like that. Just thought I'd put that out there as sort of a value add if you're watching this video. So 30% off discount link through Thrive Market. It's an online membership-based grocery store. Link is in the top line of the description. So if you pop down just below this video, there's a link. That link alone will get you 30% off your entire grocery order. So make sure you do check them out. So we used to think that protein drove about a 15 to 20% increase in the metabolic rate in terms of digestion. But now when we start looking at the data, we see, wait a minute, this is closer to 25 to 35% increase. So when the lion's share of our calories is made up of refined starches that are spiking insulin, which stands in the way of fat loss to begin with, that just means there's less room for protein in the equation. Okay, now remember that our metabolism is staying at a relative constant. And when you look at the data, once again, you find that by the time someone is 90 years old, there's only about a 25% reduction in their resting metabolic rate. So that's not a huge reduction when we look at how much weight we gain, right? A 25% reduction in our resting metabolic rate does not equate with how much weight we tend to gain after we hit our 40s and 50s. So we look at what happens to our lifestyle. 3 very important things. We're eating less protein at a very pivotal time when we need to maintain muscle, because if we lose that muscle, we lose our resting metabolic rate potential, okay? The other thing is we're less active, we're not moving around. And by the way, the more muscle that you have when you are active, the more you're going to burn, because muscle is just an incinerator of, once again, fuel. And of course, the third thing is going to be reducing the refined complex carbohydrates. Now, a question that comes into play here is, okay, what about fruit? Is fruit going to be okay? Fruit is generally okay because A, the carbohydrate content isn't as high as it's going to be in refined starches. B, the fiber content usually keeps you satiated, so you don't eat as much. And C, the fructose to glucose ratio plays a part. Fructose doesn't spike insulin, so fructose arguably isn't going to slow down fat loss as much as, say, glucose from like a refined flour or a starch or a processed food. So I still think that 1 or 2 cups of fruit per day is totally fine, even when you're trying to keep carbohydrates low. Now, one of the simplest things that you can remember with this is if you're going to move that day, you can increase your carbohydrates. If you're going to be sedentary that day, you should decrease your carbohydrates and increase your protein. So your metabolism isn't slowing down. Everything around you is, and that is indirectly affecting your metabolism. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.